Hey, welcome. Today we're going to dive into a really pivotal moment in history. It's the story of how Rabbinic Judaism and Christianity, two religions that grew from the exact same sacred texts, ended up with profoundly different ideas about the nature of God himself. Let's get into it.
So at the very heart of this whole story is this puzzle. It's a tension that both early Jews and Christians had to wrestle with. You see, their shared scripture, what we call the Hebrew Bible, is absolutely insistent on one thing: God's total, absolute unity. But it's also packed with these other powerful divine-like figures. You've got the Word, the Wisdom, the Spirit, and this really mysterious character called the Son of Man. So the question is, how do you make sense of that? How do you square that circle?
Well, for the emerging rabbinic tradition, the answer was all about drawing some really firm lines in the sand. And if there's one person who embodies this whole mission, it's the hugely influential sage Rabbi Akiva. He basically becomes the symbolic guardian of God's absolute, indivisible oneness.
And I mean, you really can't overstate how central Akiva becomes to the whole tradition. He's not just some scholar. In the Talmud, he's portrayed as the ultimate rabbinic hero. His mind, his way of thinking, was seen as the perfect instrument for unlocking the deepest truths of the Torah. And that put him in the perfect position to really define the future of Jewish thought.
Okay, so to really get why Akiva was so important, you got to understand this massive shift that was going on back then. After the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed, the whole structure of religious authority got turned on its head. Power moved away from the priests, who got their authority from their family, their bloodline, and it moved to the sages. These were scholars whose authority came from one thing: how deeply they knew the sacred texts. And Akiva, who started as a shepherd and became this legendary scholar, he was the perfect symbol of this new way of thinking. So, how'd they do it? What was their tool? Well, it was a method you could call hermeneutical maximalism. It's this core belief that every single piece of the Torah, not just every word, but every letter, even the little decorative crowns on top of the letters, is just bursting with divine meaning. This gave sages like Akiva this immense power, not just to find all these creative new meanings in the text, but, and this is crucial, to authoritatively police its meaning, making absolutely sure that every interpretation always pointed back to one and only one God.
And this is where things really come to a head. This is the flashpoint where these two different ways of reading the text collide. The kind of abstract, theological debate suddenly becomes a very real, direct conflict over one specific, really tricky passage of Scripture. It's a conflict that the rabbis would later give a name: the heresy of two powers in heaven.
The battleground was a verse from the book of Daniel. The text describes this incredible vision of heaven where there are multiple thrones, and this powerful figure, described as one like a son of man, comes up to God, who's called the Ancient of Days. Now, if you're trying to nail down the nature of God, a verse like this just screams for an explanation. You can't ignore it.
And this is the fork in the road. On one side, you have Rabbi Akiva's school. They look at the two thrones and say, okay, one is for God, for sure, and the other, that's for a future human Messiah, King David. Notice how they keep that second figure totally and completely human. But on the other side, you have the early Christians. They saw this verse and thought, this is it, this is proof of what we believe. For them, it was obvious: one throne for God the Father, and the other for Jesus, the divine Son.
Now, this is a really important point. The phrase two powers in heaven wasn't some ancient term for heresy that was just lying around. It was a label the rabbis created specifically for this debate. It became their tool for building a boundary, a way of officially saying, that Christian interpretation, that's out of bounds. That's not proper Jewish monotheism.
All right, let's flip the coin and look at how the Christians were tackling this same puzzle. Because their solution, the doctrine of the Trinity, it didn't just show up in a vacuum. It was forged in this exact same interpretive fire, and in many ways, it was a direct response to these Jewish arguments.
You see, early Christian theologians were constantly being accused of being polytheists, of worshiping two gods. So the development of the Trinity was, in large part, a very sophisticated defense. It was their attempt to explain how they could worship Jesus as divine without giving up the strict monotheism that was at the core of their shared heritage.
And this idea wasn't invented overnight. It was a long, messy, complicated process. Over centuries, thinkers like Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, and Novatian slowly hammered out the language. They came up with concepts like the Logos, or the two hands of God, meaning the Word and the Spirit, all in an effort to explain a plurality that existed within the one God, not separate from him.
This quote from Justin Martyr from around 150 AD is just a fascinating little window into this debate happening in real time. He's arguing with a Jewish scholar named Trypho, and he's using the Hebrew Bible to try and prove that there is, quote, another God and Lord who is distinct from the Father but still subject to him. You can almost hear him struggling with the words, trying to find a way to express both difference and unity at the same time.
So when you step back and look at the big picture, what you see is this tale of two theologies that are just deeply, fundamentally intertwined. You really can't understand one without understanding how it relates to the other. In a way, they actually created each other.
And here's the key takeaway. So often, orthodoxy and heresy actually create each other. By labeling the Christian view as the two powers heresy, Rabbinic Judaism made its own definition of a strict, unitary God even sharper. And in defending itself from that very charge, Christianity developed the incredibly complex relational theology of the Trinity. And this process had consequences that echoed for centuries. Think about someone like Jerome, a later church father. When he wanted to pin down the definitive Christian Old Testament, where did he look? To the Hebrew canon, a canon that had been shaped and solidified during these very same heated debates.
So let's just break it down one last time. Both traditions kicked off with the exact same problem. How do you deal with plurality in a monotheistic scripture? Rabbinic Judaism found its answer in what you could call unity by exclusion, building theological fences to keep any second divine power out. Christianity found its answer in unity by relation, defining that plurality as an internal dynamic relationship within God. And the results? Two totally distinct, incredibly powerful, and forever linked theologies.
And all of this leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on, doesn't it? This ancient story of separation is this powerful reminder of how identity itself gets formed. It makes you ask, how much of what we believe or what our communities stand for is really defined not just by what it is, but by what it stands against?